So good evening, everyone. I'm just going to give this a few minutes for people to log on, and certainly appreciate everyone joining us this evening and tuning in to what's going to be a very exciting announcement and a invigorating conversation. So I just want to say, before I begin, a big thanks to our team, who always does a great job in organizing these events and handling all the technical issues and everything. And I also just want to take a moment to acknowledge, wherever you're watching in across Ontario, that Ontario is home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. And I just want to express my gratitude. I happen to be in Toronto tonight, and Toronto is located on the treaty lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, the Treaty 3 between the Lakes Purchase, and just also to reaffirm our party's commitment to the truth and reconciliation process, and just to say how deeply grateful I am to so many Indigenous people who have shared their wisdom with me. And I try to use that wisdom in the decisions I make at Queen's Park, and to evaluate how those decisions affect us today and for the next 7 generations. And again, I want to just thank everyone for joining us tonight. And I want to thank my guest, who I'm going to have the honor of introducing. And I think I'll begin by just saying, before I do a full introduction for Diane, probably the worst kept secret at Queen's Park over the last 24 hours is that I'm just incredibly honored that Diane Sachs has agreed to stand for the nomination for the Green Party of Ontario to be a candidate in the riding of University Rosedale in the 2022 election. And I'm just so thrilled and excited that I've decided to appoint Diane as the female deputy leader for the Green Party of Ontario. And I want to just take a moment to thank our outgoing deputy leader, Bonnie North, who has just done an incredible job and has been, a real partner with me and with Abhijit Mane, who's our male deputy leader. And I just want to thank Bonnie, who has been so gracious in saying that now that the membership 2 years ago essentially passed a constitutional change empowering the leader to appoint a deputy leader. And so Diane is the first deputy leader I've appointed. And it's just a real honor to appoint you to this position, Diane. And Bonnie, you've been so gracious about supporting that decision, and I really want to thank you for that. Diane Sachs is one of an internationally recognized lawyer and considered one of the top 25 leading environmental lawyers in the whole world. And many of you probably know Diane. She served as the Environmental Commissioner of Ontario from 2015 to 2019, until the current government abolished that position and folded it into the Auditor General's office, removing just the independent way in which the Environmental Commissioner's office, and Diane in particular as a commissioner, was a voice for the people of Ontario, evidence-based, science-based, nonpartisan voice to hold government accountable. And I would say hold all of us, everybody in Ontario, accountable around the ways in which we're addressing the climate crisis, but also other environmental conservation objectives across the province, and just did an amazing job as the Environmental Commissioner of Ontario. She has been involved in many major legal decisions, longer than I could relay, but just a few is supporting community groups when it comes to protecting areas from mining, from logging old growth forests, played a key role in an important municipal decision around the Blue Box program and supporting municipalities, and currently serves as the chair of the City of Toronto's Climate Advisory Committee. And if there is one person in Ontario that the people of this province trust to be a trusted voice, a knowledgeable voice, and an articulate voice on how to address the climate crisis and the ecological crisis we face, I can't think of anybody better to fulfill that position than Dianne Sachs. And so, Dianne, it's just a real honor to have you join our team and join us here tonight. And I wanted to just open by asking you, like, how you're doing through COVID, personally and professionally, and just how you're dealing with this busy online schedule that we're all experiencing now.
Well, Mike, thank you for all the kind words, very kind words that I will try to live up to. And thank you to Bonnie very much for making a place for me. I look forward to telling you in person. I mean, in terms of COVID, like everybody else, my life changed in the middle of March. I had a very busy schedule booked, continuing to travel around Ontario, meeting all kinds of groups, talking about climate. And my last talk was on March 11th. I got home that day, and that was the end of that. But I am very conscious that compared to most of the people in Ontario and in the world, I am extremely lucky. Nobody that I love is sick or has died from COVID. Nobody that I love has lost their home or their business because of COVID. And so the disruption in our lives has been, comparatively small. Nothing has turned out the way we thought it was going to be. My son got married and there were grand plans for the wedding, and that couldn't happen. And my youngest daughter had a beautiful baby boy, and all the things that I would have liked to have happen around the baby couldn't happen. And I can't be as much support to her as I would like to be. But as I say, I'm very conscious in counting my blessings. And one of the interesting things about the COVID world is that organizations all around the world have put on the most astonishing assortment of climate conferences, usually free, very high quality, available, all of them just from sitting here in my little office. So I've been able to listen to the International Emissions Trading Association's European conference on what's happening in Article 6, trading of international emission rights, really, really interesting up-to-the-minute research on diseases from animals and how environmental destruction is making pandemics more dangerous and more common and why that's happening, economic analysis from around the world, building back better work. So it's been a little bit like drinking from a fire hose because there's so much to learn and so much that's available. But on the good side, there's so much to learn and there's so much available and there's so many amazing people who are making resources available. So I've been trying to learn as much as I can. And in between, I've taken on a few projects.
Well, one, congratulations to the newest member of your family. And I know we've had some additions to my extended family, and I know how hard that is during COVID. So Dianne, one, I'm just excited to have you join the Green Team. And as I think about, your career as, a top internationally recognized lawyer, former environmental commissioner of Ontario, you're in incredible demand in terms of speaking not only around Ontario, but internationally as well. And so what made you decide to jump into partisan politics? Because I know you've avoided partisan politics throughout your career. And I guess a supplement to that would be, and why the Green Party?
Well, you're right. I did successfully avoid it for 45 years. And I was very happy that way. I mean, I've told you this, but it's literally true. Every single day I was environmental commissioner, I gave thanks that I was responsible for dealing with good public policy and not with politics. That's where public policy is where I feel comfortable. No question about it. Adam Radwanski really, the Globe and Mail reporter, really pinned me to the wall with an article of his about a year and a half ago, where he wrote that environmentalists, and I think he may even have called out specifically women, like to work on policy and don't like to get their hands dirty with politics. And I said, yes, 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 that's me. Absolutely. That is where I feel happy. But as he pointed out, there is valuable work to be done in developing good policy and doing the analysis and presenting the evidence and all of those things, but it doesn't actually change anything. The people in power set the rules. And we've seen that with the conservative right in the United States, that they have had a very carefully designed campaign, admittedly funded with billions of dollars, which I don't expect we're going to have, over 30 years to seize power by every possible means, because that way they could change the rules. They could change all the rules, the political rules, the legal rules, the regulatory rules, in ways that have suited their interests. So in a democracy, a big part of that is determined by who runs and who they run for. And so even though this is a really hard thing for me, my parents always taught me that those who are fortunate have a duty to give back as best they can. And at this point in my career, this is something that I can do. And so it seems to me it's something that I owe. Certainly people my generation, the baby boomers, we presided over this enormous collapse in the biodiversity of the world, the enormous increase in the climate pollution in the atmosphere. This has happened on our watch. I think we owe a really big debt to today's young people who are going to have to live with the consequences of what we've done. And so writing articles, giving speeches, mentoring young people, this has all been great, but it's not enough. Everything we've done up to now isn't enough. So we have to do more, and this is a more that I can do.
Well, I appreciate you for stepping up, and you still get to, I can tell you as an MPP, you still get to do the other things, but sometimes you have to do some of the messier political things too at times. But it is a way to move things forward at Queen's Park. And speaking of Queen's Park, I'm just curious, like, I would guess being the environmental commissioner must have been a bit of a dream job for you, and you're very good at it. So what did it feel like when the Ford government really pretty early in its mandate abolished the position and essentially, take the job away from you?
Well, I was outraged and heartbroken, and I still am. I loved that job, and I gave up everything I had built in 40 years to take it. I gave up my practice. I gave up my clients. I gave up my staff. I gave up my board positions. I gave up my authorship of the legal periodicals that I had invented and developed. I had to give up literally everything I had built in 40 years to do it. And I did it in exchange for a legislative guarantee that I had 5 years to be commissioner. And that's why, the Ford government fired the chief scientist, Molly Schochet, who just won the prize as the best scientist in Canada. He fired her the very first morning. I don't think he even met her. It took him longer to fire me because he had to bring in special legislation, which he did by sticking it into a pretend budget bill, which was not, again, a proper use of the legislature. So that, I think, was clearly very distressing for me and for my team and all the people who had joined us specifically to do the work that we were doing, which is not being done anymore. I was pleased to see the very large number of people in the public who were polled who, when I was appointed commissioner, most people didn't even know we had an Environmental Bill of Rights or an environmental commission. And 3.5 years later, most of the people in the province, when surveyed, recognized that having the Environmental Commissioner's Office abolished was going to be bad for them and bad for the province. So I appreciated that recognition and that support. But the fact is, my office was abolished and silenced. Jerry DeMarco, an assistant auditor general, has a title a little bit like mine, but he doesn't have a job anything like mine. You haven't heard him say a thing since he was appointed. So I felt personally bereft. I felt the province had been very badly served. but still there were other things to do. But what I see month after month, year after year, as the Conservatives continue to hack away at the most basic environmental protections, the conservation authorities. Now,
the budget bill right now.
the provincially significant coastal wetland in Durham, after all the evidence we have as to how desperately we need that, not only for all the wildlife, but for ourselves to protect the people who live nearby from flooding. And yet it's being destroyed for a short-term profit for a developer. This breaks my heart, and it's outrageous. And the stories that are being told about it to people aren't true. So it just seemed to me that, all right, I would have been very, 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 very pleased to have spent the last part of my career as environmental commissioner and finish there. And that choice wasn't given to me or to the province. So when you asked me to join you and help strengthen the Green voice in Ontario, and to help strengthen the young people who are the backbone of your party, that seems to me like something that at my stage of life I should do. They deserve my support in whatever way I can give.
Well, we're happy to have you, and I feel like if the Ford government's going to deny the people of Ontario a position like the Environment Commissioner to hold them accountable, then we just need to get more people like you in the legislature to hold any government accountable and to be in government in the future. Diana, switch gears just a little bit. I'm just wondering if COVID has made you rethink your approach to climate action and the climate crisis.
Yes, in at least one important way. I'm really focused on climate, as you know. I really do believe that if we get the climate crisis wrong, not much else is going to matter. And I am also very conscious that any government only has so much time, so much energy, so much resources. And if they take on too much, they tend not to get anything done. So I have really resisted the intersectionality conversation, this argument that, as somebody put it to me, well, we can't deal with climate change until we've solved capitalism and colonialism. And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, if we can't start on climate until those are fixed, we're not going to get this done. The window is too short. Those are enormous, deeply rooted institutions of great power. We can't do everything at once. As somebody said to me, it's like trying to be a mile wide and an inch thick if we try to do everything. And I still think that's right. But I am also have become much more conscious, as I think most of us have during COVID, about even more viscerally how adverse impacts like COVID and the pandemic affect the vulnerable the most. At the same time that we've heard so much more about racial injustice, so much more about the persistence of racism in Canada as well as elsewhere, and how many disadvantages there are for people, a large part of our community. So I have said many times in my talks, the vulnerable suffer the most, climate change exacerbates inequalities, we need to pay attention to the most vulnerable, the low income, as we design climate policies. I mean, I put that in all of my reports. But I have been thinking a lot more about this question of environmental justice, racial justice, climate justice, and how we can integrate those things better as we figure out what to do next. And also, who's we? Like, there has been a real, how can I put this? There's been, you said in the opening that I held the people of Ontario accountable. Well, that was not what I was trying to get across. I don't want to reinforce the stereotype that if a Green Party person shows up, you should feel guilty, right? That's already a problem, where people think that it's going to be a personal criticism. If resolving climate change, environmental degradation, racial injustice is a question of personal criticism and personal weakness and personal reproaches, we're not going to get it done. Nobody likes being judged. Nobody is drawn to something that makes them feel guilty and judged. That's not a good way forward. So thinking about, well, doing a lot of listening. I've been doing a lot of listening to Indigenous voices, Black voices, people of color. Very exciting to see Kamala Harris as the Vice President-elect of the United States. Very exciting to see Annamie Paul as the leader, federal leader of the Green Party. I'm really learning to hear better how to find co-solutions to those problems, that the pure economic analysis, which I start with, has to be tempered by how does it make people feel? How do we include more people? How do we make this something that helps heal the damage that the hammer blows of climate change are already doing and not worsens them? So that's a big thing I'm working on.
Yeah, you bring that up, and the people who are most vulnerable in COVID are also the people who are going to be most vulnerable as the climate crisis rolls out. And so I think it's impossible to separate environmental justice, racial justice, social justice from climate action for that reason, I think. So I appreciate you making those connections. I'm curious, related to that is I think you're right. It's like we can't we can't spur people to action through fear. It's better to do it through hope. At the same time, we know that we're running out of time. And so have you thought about how do we convey the urgency of addressing the climate crisis and why that urgency is so important?
Well, I spend a lot of time thinking about that, and I'll disagree with you to this extent. I do think people are motivated by both hope and fear. I think that environmentalist climate scientists have erred on the side of hope for a long time because they didn't want to scare people. And frankly, that hasn't worked all that well either. Because if it's all going to be fine anyway, then you don't have to do anything right now. So we really do have a tremendously urgent situation, not because the price is going to come right away. That's one of the real tricks of the climate crisis, is that we cause problems now and we pay for them later, which also means that younger people will pay for them more. One of the tools that I have started to use is the Inroads climate simulator. So one of the things I was doing today was running a public workshop on the Inroads climate simulator as part of the Massey College climate conference that I'm putting on. And it's a really interesting tool because it gives people the opportunity to try out their ideas and see, well, what will really happen with, it's not a perfect model, but it's the best individually accessible model that I've seen. It's fast. It's been calibrated over and over again with the enormous integrated assessment models. And so one of the people who was on my session today has heard so often that really what we need to do is plant trees. You remember all the excitement in the spring. Right. We just have to plant 1 trillion trees and it's all going to be fine. So she wanted to know, can we solve all this by just planting a gazillion trees? So that's great. We've got that tool. So the way it works is we give people a chance to pick a tool and to predict what the impact is going to be on the global temperature this century, which means during the lifetime of today's children. And what usually happens is that people think that planting trees is going to do a lot. It's going to be the heavy lifting. It's going to do most of what we need to do. And the fact is that it actually does very little. I mean, it's still worth doing. We still have lots of reasons to plant trees if we plant the right trees in the right place and look after them. But it cannot make up for the enormous amount of fossil fuels that we're burning. And she got to see that immediately in her own way. And so that allows people a sense of agency. Instead of right? Just shaming people and guilting them and telling them what they should do. Like lots of people just don't like that a lot. We didn't like it when we were 5. We don't like it much now. It's much more engaging to say, okay, here's the science. You try. Where do you want to get to? Okay, we picked a temperature target. Okay, try all the things there are. What'll get us there? And my experience has been people find that really interesting, is being given some agency, a chance to try out their own ideas, to discuss them with other people, to see what works, and then to plan an action forward. And I hope to be able to do some of that. I am not so much, well, there are people who still need to be told we're in deep trouble and we've got to act.
Mm.
And I do remind people that. But what I find now is that for a lot of people, they're already frightened. What they want to know now is there a way forward where there's a place for me and my family and the people that I love? Or is it really hopeless, right? If we've already reached the doom stage where we can't do anything, then why bother? And that's one of the reasons also that I'm doing my podcast, The Green Economy Heroes, where I can interview green business leaders from across the country who are making a living doing things that reduce our climate footprint, give us a chance to build a new economy that's going to make the world better and not worse. And it's really exciting talking to these people. It gives me some hope, and it gives other people some hope to see how many amazing folks are doing great things at all stages of their life. I've had a great reception to, for example, an interview I just did with Annie Rouleau, who at 42 was kicked out of the family. Well, the family business was sold, and there she was left to start over again with little kids from scratch. Started a new business, is now one of the fastest growing businesses in Canada. Unscented, good for health, moving rapidly towards zero plastic, starting from nothing at 42. That's a story that a lot of people can relate to and can get some hope from, and maybe some inspiration.
Yeah, well, I think especially coming out of COVID, that kind of hopeful inspiration, especially on the job and economic front, is really important. So I hope everyone tunes into your podcast, and 2, thank you for sharing that story. Last weekend, the Green Party of Ontario, we held our annual convention, and one of the things we asked people was why Greens matter. And we asked them to put it out on social media, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll say capital G Greens in this case. And so I'm curious, Diane, why you think Greens matter?
I think it's really important to change the perceived area of political possibility. The Liberals have done a lot that's valuable on environment and climate. Certainly, most of the time that I was commissioner, the government of the day was Liberal, and I found lots and lots to criticize about them. There was never a shortage. But they were doing a lot of things right. Ontario had a tremendous amount to be proud of. But they just weren't brave enough. The Liberals' perception is that they are doing as much as is politically possible on climate. And how much is that? Not very much. If you look at the most recent throne speech from the Trudeau government, they had 21 priorities, and I think climate was 12, like right in the middle. Mm-hmm. Any lawyer knows you put your strongest point at the beginning or at the very end. Usually strongest point at the beginning, your second strongest at the end, and all that other stuff you stick in the middle. So there was climate absolutely damn in the middle. Yeah. Without, and at the same time, they gave $1 billion to Alberta to take cleanup obligations off the balance sheets of the oil companies so they could borrow more billions from the Export Development Corporation, and so on and so forth. The bottom line is Greens, by standing clearly for the kind of climate action that we really need, that the science tells us we have to have, are expanding the political space. We're not going to be government anytime soon, I don't think. But if we make it possible and necessary for the other parties, ideally all the other parties, I would love to see the Conservatives have a climate action plan too. if we create the space that allows the recognition that, yes, we're all in this together, the natural systems on which our lives depend are starting to fall apart. We need to protect them. And everybody else steals our ideas. That's what I think is really, really valuable, is to come up with the best ideas and have people steal them.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because when David Suzuki came to Guelph to endorse me and launch my last provincial campaign, he said, Mike, I'm happy to endorse you. I hope you get elected. And I just want you to know that someday I hope we don't need a Green Party anymore because every party's green. And I said, David, I'm fine with that. I'm good with that.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I think the Green Party is really helpful as a way to focus concern and action, to have the kind of conversations we need to have. As I say, I think Anime gives us an extra opportunity. It shouldn't be the job of people of color to always lead the conversation about environmental justice and so on, but she is in a particularly good position to help the rest of us find a way forward in that conversation. I think there's a lot of really important conversations, hard conversations to be had where we can play a useful role. And then the bigger parties, let's see them do something once we show the way.
Yeah, and we absolutely need green MPPs to show the way. And the more we have, the faster and more transformative and visionary we can show the way. And so I think that's why it's so important to have people like yourself, Diane, who just has such impeccable credentials to step up and enter into politics and to run for the Green Party, because we need your voice at Queen's Park. I want to end. We should probably wrap up. It's about 7:30. I want to end with just a few rapid fire questions that I'm hoping that people will have some fun with, and you'll have some fun with, so we can get to know you a little bit better personally. And so the first one is just, who's your personal hero?
My father, Dr. Morton Schulman, he was chief coroner in Toronto. He was fired by the Conservatives for investigating their wrongdoing almost exactly 50 years before me. And I've tried to live up to him my whole life.
Yeah, big shoes to live up to as well. What's your favorite hobby or interest?
I love almost any way of getting around in a beautiful, quiet place that involves water and no noise. So
I could tell from your background.
Yeah, anything with a paddle. That was taken on a kayaking trip. But yeah, to be outside where it's beautiful and hopefully where there are birds and it's quiet, and to move under the power of my own body, that's a great pleasure.
Do you have a favorite getaway in Ontario to go paddling?
Well, my favorite place is Algonquin.
Yeah.
It's just that to me is the right place for canoeing. But Ontario is full of fabulous, gorgeous, interesting, amazing places. And since I both canoe and kayak, almost anywhere where there's water, if it's warm enough, I want to get a paddle in.
I took my mom and my daughter when she was 14 and my mom when she was in her mid 70s. We canoed the Barron Canyon in Algonquin. It was just sort of one of those once in a lifetime trips for my mom, and for me to take her at that age, it was fantastic. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading a book called The Difference by Marion Endicott. It's a fascinating novel about, among other things, colonialism and the residential schools, but told from the story of a little girl on a sailing ship, a cargo ship in the South Pacific. So where she's seeing how empire plays out in the different countries around the world at the same time as she's remembering her own experience being basically the child of staff in one of the bitter residential schools. So very well written, very thought-provoking, hard on the heart, but important to read.
And final question, something that might about you that might surprise people.
Oh goodness, I don't think I'm surprising. It seems to me I've been doing the same things over and over and over and over again, but something, I'm supposed to think about that beforehand. I don't know. I like Sudoku.
Sounds good. My wife loves Sudoku as well. I've never gotten into Sudoku, so maybe I'll have to take them up. So Diane, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you've had an incredibly busy day, and I really appreciate having this opportunity to have a conversation, to introduce you as the new female deputy leader of the Green Party of Ontario, the person contesting the nomination in University Rosedale. And it's just really, really means so much to me to welcome you to our team tonight.
Well, thank you, Mike. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you, everyone. I just appreciate so much everyone who's tuned in tonight. And Diane, again, thank you for joining us. And thank you to the team who does such a great job with all the work that the Green Party does. And most of all, I just want to really thank all of our members and volunteers who just do tremendous work to make sure that the Green Party's transformative vision and our bold policy ideas are heard across the province. So thank you. Good night, everyone. Be safe, be well.